Imagine moving your sick child into what seems like the perfect house, only to discover you've brought your family into a building where the dead once waited. In 1986, Carmen and Al Snedeker thought they had found an answer to their prayers when they located a spacious rental home in Southington, Connecticut, close to the hospital where their eldest son Philip was receiving treatment for Hodgkin's disease. The house at 208 Meriden Avenue was large, affordable, and seemed to offer exactly what this struggling family needed during one of the darkest periods of their lives. But within days of moving in, Carmen made a discovery that would chill her to the bone. While exploring the basement of their new home, she found embalming equipment tucked into corners and hidden in closets. The previous owners had failed to mention a crucial detail about the property. This house had not simply been a home. It had been a fully operational funeral home where the dead had been prepared for burial, where bodies had been drained and preserved, where the final transformations between life and death had taken place in the very rooms where the Snedeker children now played. Carmen later described the feeling that came over her in that basement as something beyond ordinary discomfort. There was a wrongness to the air itself, a quality she could not name, but that her body recognized immediately as dangerous. The family had already signed the lease and could not afford to move again so quickly, especially with Philip's medical expenses mounting. They decided to stay, convincing themselves that the history of the building was just history, that whatever had happened there before had no power over them now. They could not have been more tragically mistaken. Within weeks of the family settling into the house, Philip began to change. His parents first attributed the shifts in his personality to the brutal effects of cancer treatment. Hodgkin's disease and the chemotherapy used to fight it could certainly account for mood swings, fatigue, and depression. But what they witnessed went beyond anything the doctors had warned them about. Philip became someone they did not recognize. He spoke in ways that seemed alien to his character, expressed impulses that horrified his family, and experienced episodes where he seemed to be watching his own actions from a distance, unable to control what his body did or what his mouth said. The other children in the household began reporting experiences that made Carmen's blood run cold. They saw figures moving through the house at night, shadow forms that walked with purpose through hallways and rooms, appearing solid enough to be human until they vanished into walls or simply dissolved into darkness. The basement, where the embalming equipment still lingered, became a place of particular terror. Multiple family members reported seeing apparitions down there that seemed connected to the building's past, figures that appeared to be waiting for something, or perhaps still conducting the grim work they had performed in life. The smell of decay began to permeate certain rooms despite obsessive cleaning. Water flooded the basement repeatedly without any identifiable source, as if the building itself were weeping. Objects moved overnight, appearing in different rooms from where they had been left, arranged sometimes in patterns that seemed deliberately meant to disturb. Perhaps most unsettling were the dreams. Different family members began experiencing nightmares so vivid and disturbing that they hesitated to speak of them. Yet when they finally shared their experiences, they discovered they had been dreaming of the same images, the same figures, the same scenes of horror. This sharing of nightmare content across multiple individuals was not something that medical science or psychology could easily explain. Carmen knew they needed help beyond what doctors or counselors could provide. She reached out to their Catholic priest, who agreed to visit the house and offer prayers of blessing and protection. The priest came, performed his rituals, and left the family with assurances that they would find peace. But the phenomena did not diminish. If anything, it intensified, as if the presence in the house had been provoked rather than subdued by the religious intervention. In desperation, Carmen contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren, whose names she had encountered in her frantic research into what might be happening to her family. The Warrens had investigated the Amityville case and dozens of others, and if anyone could help the Snedekers, surely it would be this couple who had dedicated their lives to confronting the darkest forces that could invade human spaces. When Lorraine Warren first stepped across the threshold of the Southington house, Her reaction was immediate and visceral. This woman, who had walked into hundreds of reportedly haunted locations, who had trained herself to maintain composure in the presence of malevolent forces, nearly collapsed. She later described the concentration of evil in that house as the most intense she had encountered since Amityville more than a decade earlier. The basement, where the mortuary work had been conducted for years, affected her so powerfully that she required several minutes to steady herself before she could continue examining the property. Ed Warren conducted his investigation with the methodical precision that had made him one of the most respected demonologists in the field. He interviewed each family member separately, documented every reported phenomenon, and examined every corner of the house for physical evidence of the disturbances the family described. His conclusion was delivered with the gravity of someone who understood exactly how serious the situation had become. This was not a residual haunting, not the mere echo of past events replaying like a recording. This was an active, intelligent, and malevolent presence that had established itself in the house and was working systematically to destroy the Snedeker family. Ed classified it as a demonic infestation of the most dangerous order. The building's history as a funeral home had created what he described as an environment of unusual permeability, where the boundary between the living and the dead had been repeatedly crossed, where death had become normalized, and where an inhuman intelligence had found ideal conditions for establishing an anchor in the physical world. The entity, Ed explained, was targeting Phillips specifically because his illness had weakened his natural spiritual defenses, making him vulnerable to oppression, the process by which a demonic force attempts to gain progressive control over a human being. But the entire family was under assault. The presence seemed to know each person's individual weaknesses and exploit them with what appeared to be deliberate strategy. It created conflict between family members, generated distrust, and fostered an atmosphere of hopelessness that threatened to break the family's will to resist. Carmen reported feeling as if the house itself were watching them, learning from them, and using that knowledge against them. The Warrens arranged for a formal exorcism to be conducted by a Catholic priest working in close collaboration with their team. This was not a simple blessing or cleansing ritual. This was the full rite of exorcism, performed over multiple sessions, each one a spiritual battle that tested the endurance and faith of everyone involved. The priest who performed the exorcism later described the Southington case as among the most demanding and draining he had ever experienced. The resistance encountered during the rite was sustained and fierce, suggesting an entity of considerable power that had no intention of releasing its hold on the property or the family without a fight. Ed Warren coordinated the structure of each session, while Lorraine maintained her role as observer and spiritual support, documenting the entity's responses and providing insight into its nature and intentions. The sessions stretched across weeks, each one pushing the participants to their limits. On September 6, 1988, following the final and most intensive session of the exorcism rite, the priest formally declared the house cleared. Both Lorraine Warren and Carmen Snedeker reported an immediate and unmistakable change in the atmosphere of the building. It was as if air had returned to rooms that had been suffocating, as if light had been restored to spaces that had been unnaturally dark. Philip's conditions stabilized in the weeks that followed. The behavioral changes that had terrified his family gradually receded. The other children stopped having nightmares. The apparitions ceased. The house became, finally, just a house. The Southington haunting would go on to become one of the most famous cases in the Warren files, documented in the 1992 book, In a Dark Place, and later adapted into the 2009 film The Haunting in Connecticut. The case generated fierce debate between believers and skeptics, with questions raised about the consistency of the family's accounts and the degree to which the building's history might have influenced their perceptions. But Ed Warren never wavered in his assessment of what had occurred at 208 Meriden Avenue. This was, he maintained until his death, a genuine demonic infestation resolved through the authority of the church and the courageous cooperation of a family willing to fight for their home and their lives. Lorraine Warren continued to reference the case throughout her career as one of the most spiritually demanding investigations she had ever participated in. A reminder that the battle between good and evil is not confined to the pages of scripture, but continues in ordinary houses on ordinary streets, where families simply trying to survive can find themselves facing forces beyond human comprehension. The house still stands today in Southington, returned to residential use, its rooms occupied by people who may or may not know the full history of what transpired within those walls during those 2 terrible years when the Snedeker family fought for their very souls against an enemy that had made their home its battleground. Hashtags. Number Ed and Lorraine Warren. Number The Warrens. Number Southington Haunting. Number Haunting in Connecticut. Number Snedeker House. Number True Horror Story. Number Paranormal Investigation. Number Demonic Haunting. Number Exorcism. Number True Ghost Story. Number Haunted House. Number Supernatural Stories. Number Creepy True Tales. Number Paranormal Documentary. Number Vanishing Roads. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented paranormal case files. All events reference real investigations by Ed and Lorraine Warren.